kind man. Thank you. And let's take a little look here at how did Germany get so strong after losing World War One. I would think that it is, first of all, the arrogance of the winners. The winners, it's also a debuff, right, in Hoi 4. The winning nations like France and UK were they believed so hard that Germany is not going to anymore, and they wanted to appease a lot, which is one of the reasons. Another reason is the German military was really eager under Nazi rule, which was made by the Contract of Versailles. Like the Nazis were growing on the soil of Versailles, right? Because the Germans were so unhappy and they voted for this. The military was very high IQ, man. Like you guys always tell me this. The allies of France actually had better tanks than Germany, but it seems like the German high command and the leadership really knew how to use their tanks and had more military knowledge. Stuff like that. Let's take a look, I would guess.
But today is no ordinary day, as thousands of armed radicals, known as the Brown Shirts, have taken to the streets. No, even though the Great War is over, the German people live in a tense and uneasy atmosphere. Inflation has spiraled out of control, and it is not uncommon to see price tags.
I still remember the pictures in German school where they had like 1 billion Reichsmark paper money and shit.
With numbers, it is only a matter of time before the situation reaches a critical point.
Da ist es. 150 Milliarden Mark. Jetzt bitte.
My grandpa's father still had money like this.
Tut mir leid, Freund. Das ist alles, was du bekommst. Der Preis ist erst letzte Woche gestiegen.
That's not really German, man. That sounds like really monkey German. If any German viewer in chat talks like this, man, what the fuck? Thank you.
Falls ihr heute haben, kostet es 200 Millionen. Morgen werden es 210 Milliarden sein. Und so weiter.
About this topic, you know what I felt when I was watching Squid Game on Netflix? The Korean... Look, I always felt South Korea as a very successful country, right? Very prosperous, economically strong. But their currency is so big, man. How is that historically explainable? Like, the lowest banknote is 10,000, whatever it's fucking called? Like, jeez. What happened in Korean history that your money is so fucked? They export a lot, so having a weaker currency is better. South Korea wants to be a millionaire. Will be interesting to watch. I was very confused by the South Korean money. Well, then this guy came. Let's be real, man. These guys could grow because of World War I and what happened. Imagine a guy that would have just shot Hitler. Wasn't he actually hurt?
Online strategy game that allows you to rewrite the history. In this video, we will cover how Germany went from being saddled with debt and suffering the worst inflation in history to somehow conquering Europe all within the span of just 20 years. While the German National Socialist Party appeared to have brought the economy back on track, we'll also examine how in many ways it didn't.
Complain about fucking
we need to
face masks and that the strawberries are 5
crippled
cents
the German economy,
higher,
and that requires going further back to the ashes of the Great War, when all hope seemed lost. Shortly after the German surrender on the 11th of November 1918, a socialist uprising forced Kaiser Wilhelm II to abdicate without designating an heir. In the wake of this upheaval, the German monarchy was dismantled, and a new government, popularly referred to as the Weimar Republic, rose to take its place. This new government was forced to sign the humiliating Treaty of Versailles in June 1919. In addition to being forced to pay crippling war reparations, the industrial heartland of the nation was occupied, and the German military was all but dismantled.
Wasn't that the same train where Hitler then made the French sign
Public perception of the new republic quickly became overwhelmingly negative, with many patriotic Germans.
Very, very sad thing. A little take about anti-Semitism, dude. There was just a case of anti-Semitism, very famous, 2 days ago in Germany. Someone that's kind of known in Germany. He went to one of the biggest hotels in my city, in Leipzig, called the Westin. Westin is where they have a Michelin star restaurant, a very, very fancy hotel. And this guy was coming in, and he was looking to get his room. The guy who works there, the guy at the table, they always told this guy, please wait at the side, at the reception, yeah. Please, you know, we have some other customers, and other customers will always go in front in the line. And this guy was like, yo, what's going on? And after some minutes, like he was waiting a long time, thank you, oatmeal, this person, this really normal person, right, was like, guys, what's going on? Can I get my room? And then a second guy, this all really happened, this is all proven. Then the second guy was screaming take your necklace off or we're not gonna serve you. And he had a necklace with the Star of David. And I gotta say, maybe I was arrogant or just blind, but I never thought that anti-Semitism was such a big thing in Germany, but it looks like it is. And another great example is truly when me and Lisa traveled. When we were in Edinburgh and London, we seen so many Jews. Kippas, the Orthodox Jews with the locks and really dressed like the Jews. You never see that in Germany. Not at all you see that, dude. And Lisa, this made Lisa very sad. It's so sad we don't see that in Germany. But man, and also in my home city 2 years ago, he tried to kill all the Jews in a synagogue. Kind of fucking insane, man. To think about that. I'm getting more sensible now for this topic, man. Look, you can think what you want, okay? I know that there's some viewers right now that are like, whatever the fuck, man. But if you just wear a fucking necklace and you don't get served in Germany in 2021, that is fucking crazy, dude. I also heard a story yesterday. You know the guy who tried to get into the synagogue 2 years ago and shoot all the Jews? The guy from my home city? He now has a lover girl. There's a woman that works for the justice system of Germany. She's like inside the prison justice system. She fell in love with him and they're now buddies. They are making letters to each other. She works for the government and she now fell in love with this guy. They can't make this up. The saddest thing about anti-Semitism is that if you literally ask an anti-Semite, like these people here in Germany, what is your problem with Jews? They have nothing. They have no real argument. It's just indoctrination, propaganda. Well, because they have all the bang. Like, there's no real soil, no ground to back this up, man. Isn't that the saddest thing? Go where you want to go.
Revolution for their capitulation during the Great War, a national myth that would have devastating consequences further down the line. With virtually no industry and a population hostile to taxation, the Weimar Republic resorted to a solution dear to the hearts of economists everywhere: printing money to satisfy its debtors. Inevitably, this resulted in hyperinflation, and the German mark plummeted in value.
It's gonna happen next year,
guys. At
guys.
its lowest point in late 1923,
Jesus.
a little over 4 trillion German marks was equivalent to a single US dollar. In the end, a desperate Germany appealed to the British and Americans for assistance, resulting in the enactment of the Dawes Plan. This plan introduced a new currency based on the gold standard called the Rentenmark,
People are so stupid
and
blaming
loaned
others for
Germany
mistakes
a
classic,
massive
yeah.
amount of money to restart its
not as far as we
industrial
always
sector.
think.
Under the Dawes Plan, the Weimar Republic enjoyed a few years of relative stability and recovery, but in 1929, the Great Depression struck, and funding from the United States evaporated almost overnight. Worse still, Germany's creditors...
It always felt like the Nazi party and Hitler could really get to power because everything went perfect for them. If you really look at history and everything that happened with the Nazis and Hitler, everything just went perfect for them. It's the perfect preparation for their rising,
for repayments, plunging the country straight back into financial ruin. While a series of German chancellors like Franz von Papen and General Kurt von Schleicher were busy handling the fallout, a new political faction began to emerge: the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or simply the Nazi Party. Founded in 1920, they preyed on middle-class fears of a communist uprising for support, and promoted an extremely antagonistic, anti-Semitic platform that demanded...
And in a weird way, in a much, much weaker way, we still see that nowadays. The German election just happened, and what the conservatives, middle to right-wing parties did when they understood that they're losing votes is they were making fear of communism, socialism, and the left. Every German chat knows this. Laschet and the CDU, the middle, they were spreading, they were fear-mongering that we have to come together and stop the left taking power. The left had 4.9% of votes, man, but they used this fear to gain a lot of people for their cause, man. It's still being used today nowadays,
a racially pure Germany.
Obviously on a much
Despite
weaker
surging
level.
in elections and soon becoming the most popular party, the National Socialists lost 2 million votes in the Reichstag elections in 1932. Seeking to capitalize on this weakness, the conservative establishment within the Republic thought the time was now ripe to pacify this violent party by welcoming some of its leaders into power. Surrounded by conservative ministers and only having a handful of allies in cabinet positions, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler was appointed Reich Chancellor by President Paul Hindenburg in January 1933. The conservative establishment thought they could control him for their own ends, but they couldn't have been more wrong. Suffice to say, Hitler and his movement could not be contained. The methods by which Hitler went from being essentially a lone chancellor surrounded by his opposition to having complete control of the government could warrant its own video. But soon enough, the Weimar Republic was no more.
Right here, this is in Nuremberg. You can see this in my Austria vlog. I was here. You got a fucking Really take a look at that. You're ignorant as fuck. Lol, Hitler and his National Workers' Parties was a far-left socialist party. Have fun with repeating history. Let me permaban you, man. You're obviously way too retarded to be on the internet. Reichsparteigelände, Nuremberg. Yeah, dude, every German should go there and check this museum, man. I have big parts in my Austria vlog, man. Check it out. It was crazy, man. Because I remember, man, there was this moment. People are so unsensible nowadays. Like all these real-life Nazis nowadays. So you go to the museum, right, and there's shit. You look at everything, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a corridor. And as you look at the corridor, you just see the corridor, right? You're just, I'm going to walk through this corridor now into the next room. And you walk, freedom of speech. Alter Leute, ey. Also manchmal muss man sich wirklich... And as you walk inside the corridor, you start to realize that left and right, there's little windows done. And as you look through the windows, you see corpses over corpses of people from KZs, man. All of a sudden, you're like, whoa, what the fuck, man, dude? And truly something that everybody should look at. You should go there. Every German should, man. Always unbelievable to me how people want shit like this back, man. You must literally be an animal in your soul, man. If you want this back, if you want fucking mountains of corpses again, if that's what you're kind of into, man, you are not a human, man. You're an animal. And after that, we went to another room and they were playing, there was a TV and it was playing a documentary about about Germans that lived in that time, right? Germans that lived during Hitler. And what was so apparent and interesting, and we still talk about this today, we were looking at these people in the TV, and we will think they will be like, yeah, it was kind of crazy, yeah. But you know what they all did? They were all like, well, it was good times, it was not bad, we all had work. Like, they really were very positive towards the Nazi regime, man. And this was like in the 80s, this documentary. They were like, oh, you know, it wasn't bad, you know, blah, blah, blah. And you sit there like, Jesus Christ, man, they still think like this, man.
With the outward display of public support, the Nazis first decided to tackle the unemployment problem. In reality, the next decade would merely see the expansion of the German military under the manipulative guise of repairing the economy. In some instances, instead of creating jobs, they simply distorted the numbers by encouraging young couples to get married through generous marriage loans.
In a Holocaust museum in Washington, they have a pile of shoes recovered from concentration camps. In this museum I talked about too, there's when you walk inside a room, there's glass on the floor, and below the glass is the old ID cards, old clothing, everything these Jewish people owned before it was taken from them is like you're walking on that. I think that's very clever done by the museum director, man. You literally walk on their belongings. It's crazy, man. I sometimes hope that when young people slowly take over and all the old people die out, maybe the world is gonna get a bit better. Maybe I'm wrong here, but if 100 people are born in the West, North America and Europe, a much smaller portion of these 100 is gonna be hardcore left, hardcore right idiots, right? I guess. Like, if you were born 80 years ago, you're much more likely to have crazy views. But nowadays, maybe I'm just coping. Maybe I'm coping. But I sometimes hope that as young people slowly take over, maybe, and education is spreading, globalism is spreading, you know, xenophobia is going away because you're traveling and stuff, right? That the world maybe becomes better. Maybe I'm just really wrong.
Which removed women from the workforce. This reduced
I mean, on average, right? I know that if you're born in fucking Kentucky village, you're still gonna join the KKK.
Active people, thus creating the illusion of a falsely esteemed workforce.
It's hard to say that people are that smart, but young people are more on average globalized, man, you know? Look, when my great-grandpa went to World War II and shot French people, he did it because he never fucking talked to a French person. And now his great-grandson, Tommy, I traveled the world a bit. I met Chinese people, I met French people, and I fucking love these people. They're amazing. When you are living in a world where you don't know anything, it's just like this argument, wherever is the least refugees, this is where the people most likely vote for the right, because they never meet refugees or talk to them or have them part of their life, man. And I always feel like the young generation with their globalization, especially in the West, will be much less on average xenophobic, because they are, I mean, look at what we're doing here, man. You're watching a German streamer, you guys are from all around the world. Dude, you know, I don't want to take a gun and invade you. I don't want to do that. You're my fucking boys, man. I want to hang out with you guys. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't this a part of how the world is? We always shit on the world, but isn't this such a beautiful thing, man? Feedback gaming in London. I was like, dude, our great-grandfathers shot each other, and you and me are great friends chilling in London. I think it's such a beautiful thing, man.
Shady tactics,
maybe I'm putting too much opium to you,
part-time workers as fully employed, or even classifying forced laborers and prisoners as full-time employees. Additionally, in accordance with Nazi racial policy, many Jews were forced out of their jobs or had their businesses confiscated and redistributed to non-Jewish businessmen who displayed loyalty to the party.
And I came to the final conclusion that hate is an emotion that you have if you hate yourself. That's what I learned in life. That honestly, I shot this always. in my early 20s, I was kind of a little bit right conservative. I voted AFD. I was like, oh, we're taking too many refugees. And then, dude, in the end, if I'm honest, man, and I remember when I started streaming, you guys liked that I was really conservative. Like, oh, man, we got to be careful with these refugees. I was really attracting the wrong crowd, which I learned in the hard way. And then something happened in my life. I became successful. I became happy. I got a perfect girlfriend, and I got a great job. For the once in my life, I did something that made me happy. And all of a sudden, I realized, dude, what the fuck's wrong with you thinking like this? I always feel like when you are a hardcore xenophobe, hate, if you're not just really a bad person, man, Lisa brainwashed, it's just because you're really unhappy with yourself. Like I, for 27 years, was so unhappy with myself. I would never say it out loud. I would never say that. I always acted like, oh, I'm so cool, but I wasn't. Didn't have a good job. I didn't pay attention in school. I was a fucking nobody, fucking loser, man. And I guess I wanted to blame others, man. And then happiness came into my life, and now I see the world very different. I really always believe that hateful behavior comes from hating yourself a bit. You were alpha as fuck, dude. How old are you? 12? Leftism is happiness, so true. No one is saying anything about leftism. I'm not left or anything. I just, see the world a bit different now, man. You vote to green, that's center left. You guys are idiots in my world. Idiotic statements. To me, there is no left or right, no Republicans and Democrats. There is only logic and reason. You look at the world and you see what is logical, what is reasonable. Sometimes it's left, sometimes it's conservative. You guys always think in these fucking patterns that are put into your brain by the leaders to divide us, man, so we don't go against the real evil people, man. I just follow the middle. I think climate change is real, it should be fixed. So I vote green, not because I'm left and I want to fucking jerk off with 75% taxes, man. It's just reasonable, dude. You guys have to stop thinking like this. You gotta wake up, man. This shit is dividing us so they can fuck us even more. The Nazis were actually left. No one cares if the Nazis were socialists. Nobody gives a fuck, Junge. Jesus, man.
And millions of Germans were now able to find full-time jobs in Hitler's new arms factories. But other job creation programs were far less traditional. Co-opting an existing labor program called the Voluntary Labor Service, the Nazis forced the unemployed or people receiving welfare benefits to volunteer for hard labor like farming or clearing earth for the state's massive construction projects. Hundreds of thousands of Germans were forced to toil in abysmal conditions for lower pay than they were even receiving under the welfare program. And
I definitely agree. When I was younger, I was around bigoted circles and bigoted myself. But as I grew older and more mature, real reality shows up. Yeah, I still, from my old life in Halle, I really was raised in a very low educated and low income area, right? The people I was surrounded with in my old hood were people that didn't have a soul, like my dad, and these people are hardcore AFD voters. And it always showed me this thing. When I look at my neighbor and my dad, they never talk to other races or other people or cultures, man. They only live in their own circles, and they're very hurt inside. They feel left behind, they feel left by the government, they want to blame someone, and it's easy to blame the refugees, It's just a perfect example of people that are kind of really unhappy with themselves and put that on someone else. They are doing the true copium,
Who expressed complaints were sent to early forms of the concentration camps.
You just got rich. Wow. I should just play Battlefield all day and not talk about this.
And yet, to the Nazis, these suffering workers represented an encouraging statistic. By 1935, unemployment rates had plummeted to only 2 million people.
Ah, man, I can't.
But if you include the unemployment rate, the forced laborers...
Look, that's me right now. That's what you did to me, man. Captain Non-Sub over here.
Prisoners and women taken out of the workforce by marriage loans, the actual unemployment rate stood at about double this figure. However rotten its foundation may have been, the German economy was growing. But it was not nearly enough to cover the amount the government...
The last chance of Germany instituted many successful economic reforms that only began to bear fruits under the Nazi regime. It's like when Trump still had benefits from the Obama administration, right? What?
...was spending. Rather than temper their ambitions, the Nazis engaged in massive deficit spending to finance the programs they had in mind. German economists instituted a complicated new credit
His name was Schacht, not Schnacht.
system called MIFO bills that allowed them to create and spend enormous amounts of cash while avoiding a new round of hyperinflation. These MIFO bills essentially acted like government bonds and allowed the Nazis to spend money that didn't really exist. This initially proved successful, but gradually collapsed.
When the streamer is coming back from toilet, let's spam, he forgot MIFO bills. Tommy lose the MIFO bills. No. Wait, did I? Wait, I lost MIFO bills because I was pooping? Oh no, that's all good. Sorry, no, it's all good. Sorry.
We trolled Tommy, guys. We showed him. High five, yeah. We trolled Tommy. Good job, Jacob. Jacob, are you coming to the Magic the Gathering tournament on Sunday? Or are you having the date with the cute girl from Glass? Jacob, I was just joking. Yeah, Daniel. See you at Magic the Gathering.
The German government was spending exorbitant amounts of money on rearmament and public works projects.
What is that? Oh, Saarland was under, sorry, I'm an idiot. They had, like, certain laws, right, or something.
With the mindset that it would all be repaid by the plunder and land seizure of future conquests. They instituted no long-term economic plan and made no attempts to boost foreign trade or look beyond the coming war. As the national debt skyrocketed, the Nazis didn't stop to consider what would happen if they lost the war they had been banking on. Instead, they invested everything they had into ensuring they...
And that's always the thing I realized, dude. All these right-wingers that want Germany to be strong again and think of these old times. In my opinion, the Nazis are the worst thing that ever happened to Germany. If you truly love Germany and you're patriotic, you love Germany, you should be very much against the Nazis and what happened there, you know? Nothing ever worse happened to Germany than this shit, you know? Like, how are you celebrating that stuff, man?
Every subsidy and every investment made went into
some
manufacturing
people
and
in Germany don't
engineering
think
at
that
the
way.
almost complete abandonment of consumer.
It's just like this thing, you know, I was raised among GDR people, and they all say, in the GDR, everything was better, everybody had jobs, everything was nice, you know, there was no graffitis, but the problem is that these people don't see behind the scenes, they don't look deep, they don't see, like, all the depth communism journey had, they don't see that stuff, you know, they just...
goods. All of the Nazis' programs and initiatives, from job creation to public works to even their racial policies, were ultimately meant to serve the cause of rearmament. Perhaps one of the most famous public works launched during this time.
Like, I always felt like Hitler was the biggest anti-German ever. He had the most negative impact on Germany of all times.
The Autobahn highway system was no different. Financed in part by laws that granted $1 billion marks for infrastructure projects, the Autobahn was marketed as a massive modern highway system.
It wasn't Germany, it was Austrian, man. It's all the fucking same. Austrians are just Germans with two sticks up their ass. Germans have one stick up their ass, Austrians two. It's the only difference.
For the new German citizen to proudly tour his country behind the wheel of a shiny new car. Unsurprisingly, it also had another purpose. Hitler envisioned the highways of the Autobahn as the main arteries of a new military mobilization system. He pictured columns upon columns of panzers rolling down the roads protected by a thick concrete shell that towered over the highways and blocked air attacks. Contrary to his lofty vision, no concrete tunnels were ever built, and the roads proved too unstable for heavy tanks to roll along. Even the system under which the highways
But he made the Autobahn,
were laid out prevented them from having any use in military mobilization, since the roads were too far away from any
four-year plan was launched with the goal of launching public works project and lowering unemployment and...
Despite creating
No, I genuinely want to
100,000 jobs and
listen to
improving
him. What am I
infrastructure,
so
the
wrong
Autobahn's true
about?
success was propagandistic. Hitler personally planned some routes to weave through the most picturesque views in Germany, and insisted on the most modern bridge and road designs to project the image of a unified and idealistic state. But the government encountered a bump in the Autobahn. The average citizen couldn't afford a car, so who was going to use the new highway system in the first place? As a solution, Hitler imagined an affordable and cheaply produced vehicle known as the People's Car, or Volkswagen, that everyday citizens could purchase and drive through the new
Yo, who has Volkswagen stocks in here? Aren't they on the Panama Papers, and they have offshore accounts in Cayman Islands? Like, Volkswagen is is putting so many taxes around the German fiscus, man.
Nowadays, through the beautiful German countryside, a mass advertising campaign and workers' payment program were launched to promote the car, and hundreds of thousands of laborers enthusiastically signed on.
In the first quarter of 2021, VW made 4-point-something billion plus, the black numbers, but got 3 billion in Corona help, man. If you have a fucking restaurant down the street and you're asking for a little bit of Corona help, you have to fight your ass off and wait for months till that arrives. But when VW makes 4 billion plus, they still get 3 billion of the taxpayer. Like, what the because they're all sucking the dick in the fucking backyard, man.
So much during this period, everything ended up being used in service of the ultimate goal instead: rearmament. Despite 340,000 workers investing 110 million Reichsmarks into the car payment program, not one would actually receive a car. All of the funds collected by the People's Car Campaign went straight towards war spending. Car ownership in Germany did noticeably increase during this period, but the Autobahn was not nearly the success portrayed by Nazi propaganda. Even by 1939, railways remained the most common form of transport in the country. These years of spending on military rearmament did not go unnoticed, as Germany was not yet ready for war.
I'm still scared about the train system, because I always think how you memers are going to play HoI4, and imagine someone paratrops your main train line for like, I don't know, 1 week, and all your supply just falls apart or something. And aren't encirclements going to be much bigger now? Well, if I encircle, or let's say I rush you down, you're actually still stronger, you're beating me, but I found an opening and I'm rushing cavalry or light tank through, and I just take your fucking railway. That scares me, you know?
Hitler had to fabricate a variety of excuses to justify the expansion of the armed forces to foreign powers. To the surprise of many, Germany was suddenly very interested in producing thousands upon thousands of innocent passenger planes and agricultural tractors. These vehicles only existed on paper, however. There was nothing innocent nor agricultural about the Messerschmitts and Panzers rolling off the assembly lines, or the rifles and howitzers emerging under the table from civilian manufacturers across the country. This disguised military buildup culminated in 1935 when mandatory conscription was passed, and by the end of the year, the army had grown to nearly 800,000 men, over 8 times the maximum set by the Treaty of Versailles.
Hitler would further violate the Treaty of Versailles just a year later when Germany force swept into the Rhine.
Act, the last of Germany's non-Jewish unemployed men were swept into military service, and unemployment was, on paper at least, fully eradicated. The result of all of this was that Germany entered the Second World War far better off than it had been at the end of the last Great War. The gross national product had surged to well over 100 billion Reichsmarks in 1939 from a low of 60 billion in 1932. And to all, it seemed that Germany had fully regained its strength. But while unemployment was down and manufacturing and capital were up, many of those so-called employed Germans were slaving away in a labor camp, and that capital was contingent on the complete success of the war. Further, the benefits from all of this economic success were skewed heavily towards those considered true Germans, and came at the expense of everyone else. Like the Autobahn, unable to carry Hitler's tanks, the Nazi economy was shining.
I always wondered that if the Nazis would have won the war and they took over the world, and then many years later they find technology that shows you your DNA, and they find out that they're all kind of Slavic and all that shit, like on all these DNA websites, man, they would have been like, oh man,
on the surface,
maybe we don't need that technology
at its core.
Interesting, man. There's a lot of videos I want to watch from him, man. Finished the End of the Beginning mod with Prussia. Good mod. Check out the VOD. We talked about it, man. Really, really cool. And we reacted to some videos, man. I will be back tomorrow with a longy stream. Anyway, I see you tomorrow, guys. Have a great evening, and don't be hateful in your heart. Be nice to each other. Yes. Check out Twitter. Bye-bye.